This is Baxter Colburn, host of the Verse of the Day podcast. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Emily, host of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come and check out my show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk about nerdy theories, games, TV shows, books, movies, you name it. We're here to talk nerdy to you. A new show comes out every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Wolpoff has saved the USA's life in this World Cup! Hall, the runner! Loose ball! It's good! Gonzaga! The flipper still fits!
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag! It gets through Buckner! Here comes Knight and the Mets win it! He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth!
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness! I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
the cheap seats.
Welcome to the Cheap Seats. Back we are here on this Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. Jeffrey Chiles, Max Wolpoff, your trusty hosts. Max, have we got a show for the audience today? NCAA tournament talk to get started for our show this morning. Getting into seeding, getting into brackets, which as we all know, they're all busted at this point. Frozen Four in another segment later on in the show, but I'm ready to go. You ready?
Yeah, my bracket is completely burned to ashes and buried in a graveyard. It is just dead.
I feel like I want to take a lighter, light mine on fire, and do what all the Cleveland fans did when LeBron left Cleveland. It doesn't deserve to see the light of day ever again, but fortunately for me and my own sanity, the rest of America is having similar feelings about their bracket.
Yeah, I think everyone had something that busted them. If there is a single perfect bracket left, I would like to meet this person and tell them straight to their face, whoever it happens to be, you do not believe the picks you made, right? I just don't understand. How could anyone have predicted this? And I'm happy my bracket is dead. I'm happy it's gone. I'm happy I no longer have to care about rooting for being right. I want to root for the madness. I want to root for the chaos. I loved it when UMBC won. It was fantastic. That's my home state. I was thrilled.
Yeah, I can imagine you being a Baltimore guy and a DC guy just to be absolutely elated with that one. We could devote an entire segment, heck, an entire show to that upset and what many are calling one of the greatest upsets, not only in college basketball history, but in sports history. I think there's an argument to be made for that. We'll get into UMBC and UVA later, but this whole first round of this tournament, I mean, what a crazy tournament. And you and I had a discussion a few weeks ago about, is this the year that Blue Bloods can still make a deep run despite not being as strong? I think that has been answered emphatically for us in the first round or first two rounds of the tournament. Multiple upsets, obviously UMBC, 13 seed Buffalo, crushing DeAndre Ayton in Arizona, 89-68.
Wasn't even close.
No, that game was not even close. The Bulls, who were unfortunately on the selection show called the Bills by Ernie Johnson.
Oh, whatever.
Everyone knows who the Buffalo Bulls are now. SUNY Buffalo, I believe they are. But the Bulls playing Arizona and absolutely hammering it to them, 89-68. Taking away that up and down style and that jump shooting style from Arizona and just slowing down that game, and they really just ground Arizona into a paste.
You know what's great about this for Arizona? They no longer have to vacate a victory because of the impending NCAA investigation. It's just one and done. Wipe your hands clean. All right, that is the end of this tournament.
Arizona is one and done. For me, too, though, all the credit in the world of Buffalo, but I think even further, this validates or invalidates just how absolutely awful the Pac-12 was. You and I had that discussion about how the Pac-12 this year was terrible and USC didn't deserve to get in, UCLA didn't deserve to get in, and the teams that the Pac-12 did get in, they were one and done, like you said, in this weekend.
Yeah, the Pac-12, what was it? They went 0 for 3 with the 3 teams that they had in?
0 wins.
Yeah, 0 wins. I'm just searching through this completely busted bracket in the Public House Media Tournament Challenge, and ooh boy, man, I'm more surprised that I even was able to buy on Loyola Chicago as my one upset from day one. I was very surprised I actually got that one right.
You picked the Ramblers?
Yes, I did. I bought on Loyola Chicago. I was watching the game on my couch. And I saw it was coming down to the last possession. Like, if they make this free throw, if they make this shot, I'm going to scream. They made the shot, and I just ran around my house screaming. It was fantastic.
Well, congratulations to you, my friend. I'm glad that you got some enjoyment out of that. And furthermore, you got some points in our Public House Media bracket, which at this point, I threw down the gauntlet that fans and listeners should challenge us. There was no challenge, but I think for the solace of you and I, the fans that entered in our bracket weren't much of a challenge either. I saw a stat that 90% of America, I believe, had their brackets ruined after just the first day, not even the first 2 rounds.
Okay, funny story about that. So in our little host group chat, Baxter Colborn, one of our leaders, he sent a message before the Buffalo game went final. Hey, Max Wolpoff has a perfect bracket. And guess what happened next? Buffalo creamed Arizona. Thanks a lot, Baxter. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Well, your bracket did not take long to be busted. Mine either. I was feeling very good in those first couple of games. On that Thursday afternoon, I was feeling very good about where I stood as far as the bracket because Villanova won easily, Kansas won easily, Gonzaga, who was my Final Four pick, they beat UNC Greensboro in a tight game, mind you. Duke won going away over Iona, and then the chips started to fall with the Buffalo loss or the Buffalo win where they crushed Arizona in those games. So I felt good after, about the first hour, and then it all went to hell after that.
Yeah, that'll happen sometimes, and that's part of why I refuse to make brackets unless I'm told I have to. I hate making these things. I hate cheering to be right. I want to cheer for the story. I want to cheer for the madness. I enjoy the chaos of it all. That's part of the reason I still love college football. My school doesn't have a team. I just cheer for upsets. I cheer for the number ones to go down every single week because it makes for a better story.
Well, this was, if you liked upsets like I know you do and like many people do, this was the weekend for you to savor in those upsets, whether it was Buffalo, Loyola, UMBC. I mean, think about this. Marshall.
How did you forget Marshall?
I think it was lost in their performance against West Virginia. Rest in peace. But thank you for reminding me about Marshall. But when you think about this first week of the tournament and what we saw in terms of legendary upsets, you and I had that discussion about Blue Bloods not being as relevant in this tournament. And again, I think that was validated with Carolina going down, Virginia, obviously that historic loss. But this may go down as one of the best tournaments ever, and so far, we're only to the Sweet 16. I think this is the best tournament ever. It's got the excitement. It's got the exhilaration. You have the storylines of the 16 seed beating a 1. You have Sister Jean and those great personalities for Loyola Chicago. I mean, what a just, enriching tournament this has been.
It's been fantastic for just better stories. It's better than, okay, great, we all know the final is going to be Virginia-Villanova, who you picking? It's not like the NBA where, all right, it's Warriors-Cavs in the final, who else is going to challenge and fail? It's not like that. College basketball is supposed to be this crazy field where on any given night, any team should be able to beat any other team. UMBC has proven that. That is why this tournament is a great piece of sports history every single year. This year especially because of the lower-seeded teams, because of the non-power fives, because of the upsets. That is why I love this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. And then we had, not just sort of the blue bloods going down, and then in that first round, you had, the second round, Cincinnati losing to Nevada by a bucket. You had Tennessee out of the SEC, in which the SEC got the most teams in the tournament out of anyone, and they couldn't have disappointed more in that first week, the first weekend. Tennessee losing to the Ramblers of Loyola Chicago by 1 point, defending that last shot well, forcing Tennessee to miss, and then moving on. So in our Sweet 16, we have Loyola Chicago and Nevada. Who could have seen that coming?
Not me, and probably not Nevada or Loyola Chicago.
Not me. Not me as well.
It's great, though. How great is it that we have an 11 and a 7 in the same Sweet 16 bracket? And never mind this, we have a 9 and a 5 on the opposite side of that in the South Division, in the South bracket. This is great.
This is incredible. And I wanted to touch on that UMBC win just a little bit. Obviously, we know that had never happened in the history of the tournament, a 16 seed being a 1.
Not the men's tournament. You got to remember.
Men's tournament.
Harvard women's was the first. Stanford? Harvard. Yeah, it was Harvard, I thought.
Harvard upset Stanford.
Oh, yeah, Harvard upset Stanford. I was thinking Harvard won, so that was the only thing I really remember about that.
Yeah, no, but UMBC, first off, what a great moment for them and for their school, and for that stigma of a 16 ever beating a 1. They smashed that to smithereens. So now every time a 16 is matched up with a 1 in that first round, they're going to say, look at UMBC. They beat Virginia back in 2018. We can do that. But was it as shocking to you, Max, as it was to me, seeing UMBC with that smaller lineup? I forget the kid's name, but their point guard who just went off in that. Sorry, what?
Mora,
yeah. Their point guard, Mora, just going off and shooting over these bigger, stronger, longer, lengthier Virginia lineup. And this is a team whose defense was so, near perfect all season long, and they allowed UMBC to just shoot the lights out against them.
Yeah, I compared them to a lockdown penitentiary on our last podcast, and I guess UMBC ran the prison break.
The inmates are running the asylum.
Yeah, the Retrievers ran a great system against a team like Virginia that is defense hardened. They are determined to not let you score the basket. UMBC had hot hands in that game. They rode them all the way to the end, and Virginia did not have the offense to match.
Well, wasn't that the discussion that you and I had, was that we wondered if the Wahoos would have enough firepower to hang with anybody? I mean, not just considering UMBC in the first round. We were talking about, would they be able to advance past the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8? And turns out that wasn't even relevant to our discussion. University of Maryland, Baltimore County completely put an end to Virginia, and the Cavaliers now own 2 of the worst losses in tournament history.
Look, I was so happy. Some of my friends from home, they go to and have graduated from UMBC, and they were all over social media with pictures of their graduation, like, throwback to when I graduated from the best basketball school in the country. I was so happy for them. For years, UMBC in the Maryland circles has been considered a computer science school, which, listen, the criticism is valid. There are a lot of commuters, and there are a lot of computer science majors at UMBC. It's a great program. Maybe computer science majors like it there. But it also graduates so many qualified people to go out into the world. It teaches people very well, and they've just pulled off one of the best free publicity stunts in their entire history.
Wow, hats off to UMBC. I mean, I didn't think we'd ever see that, and I don't know if we'll ever see that again, but in my opinion, again, this can open the door for future 16 seeds to say, yes, this is possible. We can do this. And really, where does it rank in terms of the all-time great upsets? We'll talk about that later, and we'll pose that to you, our loyal listener, as our poll question on our Facebook page. But UMBC, which we've broken down this game a little bit, the entire other side of the bracket, the East, everything was looking pretty much chalk. Villanova had one going away in their game. West Virginia crushed the Racers of Murray State. Marshall with that nice win over Wichita State. Butler advancing to play Purdue in the second round in that Battle of Indiana. So in terms of the South or the East region, which a lot of people considered one of the tougher brackets in the tournament this year, for the most part, all the teams that advanced out of there were chalk, either a top 1, top 2, top 3, and then a 5 seed in Virginia.
Yeah, I think this is the bracket region with the lowest aggregate seed total of 1-5. That's 6 plus 5, so that's 11. And already in the other brackets, there's an 11 in the Midwest, there's an 11 in the South, and there's a 9 and a 7 in the West. So the East really was the bracket of the favorites. Marshall just couldn't pull it out against West Virginia.
They couldn't pull it out. The West Virginia Mountaineers and that great defense they play with Bob Huggins really stifled Marshall and didn't allow them to get a lot of clean looks in that game. Villanova didn't have any problems in their bracket. Purdue, even without Isaac Haas, who broke his elbow and was out for the tournament, still with the help of Carmen Edwards and the rest of that Boiler offense, able to advance to the Sweet 16, where they will play Texas Tech. Max, if you look at the tournament and you look at who's advanced as far as a breakdown, Big 12 and ACC, at least from my count here, have performed the best so far in the tournament.
So far, yes. I mean, Villanova is dragging the Big East there, and man, the conferences, I think, at this point don't really matter. It's a matter of the teams. It's great to look at the conferences of, all right, who gets farther, who is able to get bigger visibility for their conference. But right now, at this point, I don't think anyone's looking at the potential Elite Eight matchup in the Midwest like it's Duke-Clemson, the battle of the ACC potentially. No one's looking at it like that. Come on. You want the best matchup. You want the two best teams head-to-head against each other to make for a compelling game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's just something that I wanted to touch on because every other discussion from the talking heads at ESPN all year long is about which conference is the best, which conference is stronger. We have the Big Ten ACC Challenge, and the SEC Big 12 now sort of has a challenge of their own. And, as a Big Ten guy, yeah, I take a little bit of pride in both my alma mater, Michigan, and Purdue are in the Sweet 16. But the Big Ten struggled all year, and they only got 4 teams in the tournament, so it's probably more of a credit to them that they were able to get 2 in the Sweet 16. But if we look down here at the bottom half of the bracket, you have that ACC matchup, like you mentioned, in Syracuse and Duke, who pulled off. We're talking about upsets, and in this year of the tournament, Max, there are so many just unbelievable upsets that we didn't even really, until it was 4th or 5th down the bullet list, talk about Syracuse beating Michigan State in Detroit.
Yeah, we didn't even mention this team that we both thought probably should not have made the tournament is currently in the final 16.
Go Qs!
Really. Yeah, incredible, really, for the Orange that they made this tournament at all, that they get out of the first 4. They had to play an extra game, keep in mind, and they're here against Duke now. They still have a chance to pull off more surprises.
I watched a lot of that game, and to be honest, as a Michigan guy, I'm rooting against Michigan State, but it was doubly special for me because now both my alma maters are in the Sweet 16, and Jim Boeheim, for all the criticisms leveled at him, for all the struggles that Syracuse had offensively, and let's be honest, this was a terrible game offensively between Michigan State and Syracuse. I think Syracuse they made 1 3-pointer the entire game. They shot below 35% for the game. They were just awful offensively, but they did just enough. And on the Michigan State side, Tom Izzo, who has the March reputation, some of that shine is coming off the luster right now. The bloom is falling off the rose. And yes, I have a little bit of a stake in Schadenfreude and seeing Michigan State struggle. But Tom Izzo now has lost in either the first or second round in 3 straight seasons. That's almost unheard of in East Lansing. For all the talk about Michigan State, and I'd read a lot about them, obviously, as a rival. I followed a lot of what was going on off the court for them. You could argue that's a distraction. But Michigan State, with Nick Ward and Miles Bridges, had one of the clear-cut teams, supposedly, that were going to just waltz all the way to the Final Four. They, again, and I think this is a lot to do with Tom Izzo's approach, and he runs a lot of motion stuff and stuff that was successful for him earlier in his career, but he plays a guy like Ben Carter for 15, 20 minutes in that game, and I'm thinking, where's Miles Bridges dominating down low? Where's Nick Ward? He just, inexplicably, refuses to get the ball to his big men in the post, and athletic big men, mind you.
Man, I can't trust Michigan State in this tournament. The last couple of years, I've picked them to go deep. A few years, like 2 years ago, I picked them to be champions. They lost to Middle Tennessee in the first round. Every time I pick a bracket, every time I pick a winner, the my champion almost always ends up losing in the first 2 rounds. It is either a curse or I'm just bad at basketball. Probably both.
Insanity, Max. Insanity, I tell you. I don't think anyone is going to hold that against you. Everyone pretty much sucked who entered in the bracket challenge, and through no fault of their own, really, because, I mean, who could honestly have seen some of these upsets coming?
Great question. Moving on.
That will do it for our first segment. Your bracket, it's busted. There's no argument. You've probably lit it on fire and buried it for all eternity and put it to rest. Our show is not at rest. We keep on moving along on this Wednesday morning, March 21st, here in the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network. You can follow Max and I on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter, the Public House Media Twitter feed, and then the Cheap Seats Facebook page. When we come back, we continue our tournament discussion. There's a lot of low seeds that have emerged from all these upsets. Which low seed is most likely to win more? We'll talk about that and more on the other side. This is the Cheap Seats from the Nosebleeds on the Public House Media Network.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
As long as you'll be my friend at the end. If I go crazy and lose, you should call me Superman. If I'm alive and well, will you be there?
Welcome back to the Cheap Seats this morning, March 21st. Jeffrey, Chiles, Max, Wolpoff, continuing our wild tournament discussion in the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. And now the question remains, for all the gravitas, Max, that these smaller seeds have accumulated, can they keep it going in the Sweet 16?
There's a lot of indication that I'll say, yeah, probably, especially with the South. I think the South region with Loyola Chicago and Nevada and Kansas State and Kentucky as considered lower seeds. I mean, Kentucky's there as the blue blood powerhouse that got a low seed in this. But the South region is probably really intriguing. Syracuse making some noise in the Midwest, and even Texas A&M and Florida State in the West. This is a great time to be a low-seeded team.
Yeah, I think I'll save it until the end, what I'm thinking about which seed has the best chance to advance. I guess that's sort of the question that you posed with that segment. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these teams that we watch in the tournament have the ability to keep on going, and they're a low seed by seed, but how we've seen some of them play, they don't look like a low seed. Loyola Chicago has just had a knack for a flair for the dramatic in their first couple of games. 2-point win over Miami, 1-point win over Tennessee. And this Loyola team, making their first Sweet 16 since 1985, facing Eric Musselman and Nevada here in the Sweet 16, that's going to be, I think, a showing of different styles in that game. Loyola Chicago, much more an offensive-minded team, high percentage shooting team. Nevada likes to grind teams out and maybe more play for defense and force turnovers. As far as the low seeds, I think Loyola is right up there. They definitely have a better matchup to get to the Elite Eight. But, I mean, Syracuse, yeah, they had a tough year in the ACC. They struggled in that department. They have a much taller order in facing Marvin Bagley, Grayson Allen, and Duke right there in that matchup. But I think it'll come down to, as far as lower seeds, Loyola and Syracuse, and I'll give sort of my final word later on in the segment.
I mean, I'm not overlooking a team like Florida State that's going up against a Gonzaga squad that's played 2 tight contests. And Florida State, they came out over Xavier, so we can't discount that they did upset a number 1 seed in this tournament. Man, the Seminoles have played some good basketball down the stretch, and they're going to give Gonzaga a fight. I'd be surprised, actually, if the Seminoles don't beat the Bulldogs.
So you got the Noles moving on. Why do you think that?
Why? Honestly, it's a gut feeling just watching Florida State play. They've had a good style the last games against Missouri and then against Xavier. They've played good basketball the last few games. And again, I don't watch a whole lot of basketball. My small sample size right now is telling me Florida State is looking like a winner.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, like they got the chops to keep on going. They are an interesting team. They're not going to kill you to death from the outside with jumpers, but they have some really talented big men in the middle that are going to be matchup problems in the post for anybody they face. And let's be honest, Gonzaga is normally an up-and-down transition team. Smaller players that shoot in transition, they could really have problems with Florida State in the middle. And from that perspective, Florida State's size down low, I do think you might have some credibility there with that.
Oh, hooray. I accidentally made a good point.
I didn't mean it like that. I know you're going with your gut a little bit there, and that's what you think. But, from what I've seen from Florida State, if they can overwhelm Gonzaga down low and really just, kill them in the paint and on the glass, I could definitely see the Noles moving on. Not that I wouldn't think that, but I just think Loyola Chicago playing sort of another smaller school in Nevada, they're more ripe for the pickings right there.
Yeah, Loyola Chicago probably has the best, most beneficial matchup to their liking as their program size goes. Like, they're not going up against the Dukes of the world or the Michigans or the Kentuckys. They're going up against Nevada, a team that's more within their weight class, so to speak, as far as college basketball goes. And Loyola Chicago has a fantastic story. They seemingly have everything going their way.
They have the Lord on their side, apparently.
Yeah, Sister Jean Dolores Schmidt, she was on Good Morning America on Tuesday. This program is getting so much free publicity and so much attention that it feels like a team of destiny for the Ramblers.
It very well could be. I don't know, in terms of destiny, I don't know where the buck would stop with that. Can they win this game? Definitely. Can they, beat whoever comes out of Kansas State, Kentucky in the Elite Eight? That would be a different question entirely. Kentucky has seemingly figured some things out. Again, they're not going to overwhelm you with their defense. John Calipari's team's much more perimeter and offensive oriented this year than in teams past. But Loyola Chicago, again, they can shoot it from outside, as we saw in their opening weekend. They could certainly keep it close against Kentucky, I'll say that.
Even if you give up the three-point shot and just let Loyola Chicago shoot the three-pointer until they just keep missing, that might be the strategy for whoever faces them. Just
you're gonna either wear them out, or conversely, they could wear an opponent out with taking too many threes.
Well, yes, but at the same time, you're not getting into the physical battles down low within 5 feet of the hoop if you're just letting them shoot the three and try for the distance shots. It's going to be less of a physically demanding defense if you allow them to try the three every time.
They would stay fresher. They wouldn't be involved in those paint touches and those wars down low, as you mentioned. I don't know if it's fair in this segment to call Virginia necessarily a true lower seed per se. They come out of the rugged Big 12, but they have Villanova tasked in front of them. Do you see? Is there any scenario where the Mountaineers pull it off?
Aside from catastrophe, I don't see it going on. Like, the part of the reason Purdue and Butler was so close was because Purdue was missing one of their best players with an injury. And barring a catastrophe similar to that, I don't really see the Wildcats losing this game.
No, I agree with you. I don't see them losing either. Their first two games were nothing short of a cakewalk for the Wildcats, 87-61 over Radford, and then 81-58 over Alabama. Jalen Brunson patrolling the perimeter is such a hard matchup problem, both from a defending his shot perspective and then getting in the paint, because even if Brunson can't hit his shots, he's going to penetrate into the paint and kick it out to the wing or to the outside or dump it off down low. And Villanova has, that presence inside with their 5-man in the middle too. I don't see any scenario where I have Villanova losing to a lower seed. Kansas and Clemson. Boy, this is, I think, one of the more intriguing games in the Sweet 16 matchups outside of either, Syracuse, Duke, and then you have Loyola and Nevada. These are two teams that, to this point, are very different styles, have taken different paths to get to the Sweet 16. Kansas, no problem with Penn in the first round, and then they got a little bit of a shootout with Seton Hall in round 2, 83-79. How about Clemson crushing an Auburn team that Auburn, regular season SEC champs, they averaged around 85 points a game all season long. This was never close. This was never close from about 5 minutes in, where it was tied up at, I think, 13 or 14. And then Clemson, with their athletes on the outside, with their big, rangy, athletic bigs, just grabbed Auburn by the throat and crushed their larynx. Auburn couldn't even cry for help. They were so bloodied and beaten down in this game. This was an incredible performance by Clemson to just bludgeon Auburn right over the head.
Notice how different we talk about this 1-5 matchup with the Jayhawks and the Tigers than we talked about the last 1-5 matchup with Villanova and West Virginia. The difference between these two 5 seeds of Clemson and West Virginia is about as different as night and day. Mm-hmm. Clemson feels like they've got a chance. They've played very well the last 2 games. Kansas got in a shootout with Seton Hall, came out on top, but still Kansas does have the talent to win. It's a matter of whether they run into the system that Auburn ran into.
Well, here's the thing that occurs to me about this game, too. I mentioned it a little bit in our tournament preview segment on the podcast last week. Kansas, we all know what Devontae Graham can do. He's an All-American caliber point guard. Azubuike, whose name I know you had some trouble with last week. It's okay. A lot of people have trouble with this guy's name. Azubuike, still, I have not seen any bit of news clearing him to play in this game. And you know Bill Self, he's going to have every bullet in the chamber that he can possibly have watching that film and seeing how Clemson dominated Auburn. They went right over top of them. They can throw the high pass. They can dump it down low, lob it down low, whatever you want to do. Clemson's ball movement could really be a problem for Kansas in this game. Both teams have similar athletes. But I think if Kansas, not to say that a 1 seed is ever an underdog, but without Azubuike there and without the big man patrolling the paint and potentially has the ability to guard like a 4 or a 5 away from the basket, I could see Clemson doing this. And some people might call me crazy for that, but Clemson throughout the ACC, then the blitzkrieg over Auburn, if Kansas doesn't have everybody on deck in this game, I won't say that it will be a blowout upset by Clemson, but this could be like a 10, maybe 12, 15-point win for the Tigers.
Again, just look how different we're talking about the Tigers, who are seeded the same way as West Virginia. Mm-hmm. We're talking about them like they have a real shot here, whereas with West Virginia, we're looking at Villanova and saying, yep, well, you had a good run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like with Jay Wright and Villanova's cachet that we're automatically advancing the Wildcats. And, I mean, knowing what we know about Villanova and how well they shoot the basketball the last 3 years, I mean, can you blame anybody for thinking that Villanova is just going to advance without a struggle West Virginia? I don't think it's going to be that. I think West Virginia's press defense and what they do, talk about an entertaining clash of styles, that is it. And then you have the same with Kansas and Clemson. Boy, I mean, I just was so impressed by that Clemson game and how they were able to beat Auburn over top, how they were able to beat them down the floor in transition that entire game. I would be not just to see a 1 seed lose and to keep the chaos going, but for Clemson to advance this game and to play the winner of Syracuse-Duke, and then Duke would have 2 ACC opponents in a row they've seen all year. Oh, how entertaining is this tournament? And it could be ratcheted up even further.
And that's just the matchups within the matchups. Looking at just how these teams stack up and whether they've played each other previously. Syracuse and Duke, history. Duke and Clemson, history. Syracuse-Clemson, history. There is plenty between those teams that just adds yet another layer to an already great story.
And what a story it's been. You and I talked about it in the opening segment of today's show. We're here, Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Chiles, bringing you our view from the top of the arena, top of the Coliseum, whatever you want to call it, probably because tournament tickets were so expensive and we had to sit in the cheap seats.
Oh, absolutely. I am not spending $3,000 for front row of the top bowl at TD Garden for the Boston Regional. I'm not spending that much money. Holy cow.
$3K might be understandable for a rich booster, a rich donor, or any rich alumnus that has the money to do this. But, I mean, for you being an undergrad and for me being a guy in my early 30s and still figuring things out, I would love to see a tournament game. I would love to go see Michigan play in the Final Four, and I almost did it in 2013. I almost drove down to Atlanta to do it, but we don't have that kind of money, but we do have our perspective and we do have our opinions, and we're bringing it to you this morning every week, every Wednesday on the Cheap Seats here in the Public House Media Network. Last word on this segment, Max. Of the lower seeds left, A, in their Sweet 16 game, who is the best chance to pull an upset, and B, of the lower seeds remaining, who, if anyone, gets to the Final Four?
Okay, so this is a two-part question.
Yes.
I am giving the edge to Loyola Chicago in both areas. They have a favorable matchup against Nevada. They don't have to go up against the Power 5 like Syracuse does in Duke. I'm giving the edge to the Ramblers, and it really is dependent on who comes out of Kansas State and Kentucky with whether or not they make it to the Final Four. But if it's Kansas State, there's a little bit of a better chance for the Ramblers than if it's Kentucky. Give me Sister Jean all day.
Sister Jean, she's got God on her side, and if Loyola does advance and they play Kentucky, they might need to do a little bit more praying in that game. Although, as we've seen, no one is invincible, no one is immune from these smaller schools this year. I thought about this last night. I think we can finally dispense with the mid-major labels. That just doesn't exist anymore.
Now, Jeff, I've got a question for you. This is
okay. Shoot.
Okay. All right, I'm looking at tickets on Ticketmaster for the NCAA East Regional at the TD Garden. What do you think the cheapest ticket is?
Oh, man. Fitting in a show called The Cheap Seats. Can I have a brief moment?
Okay, sure.
All right, cheapest seat. This is a Sweet 16 game at TD Garden, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to say at minimum for just your basic seat, and this is before ticket selling, person to person or driving up a price. This is from the venue, right? Not a private seller.
This is from Ticketmaster.
Okay. Cheapest seat, I'm going to say somewhere between $700 and $1,000.
Okay, no, it's not that bad.
Okay.
You are way over. It is $349.20 for the cheapest seat right now.
Oh boy. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean compared to what I said, that's a good deal. I mean, I just always kind of go higher on these things, and that was a little outlandish, I admit. I'm not that great with math or guessing those sorts of things, but
neither am I.
I would never be on the Price is Right. But yeah, that's sort of a middle ground you can find. $350. I mean, who do you think is? I mean, would you, if your team was there, would you drop that kind of money?
Would I be willing to drop a car payment on this?
That's an expensive car payment. I got a pretty
Holy
good one
cow.
compared to that.
I mean, I'm looking at the $350. I mean, that pays for electricity, water, and all this other stuff that I like living with. So, I'm watching it on TV.
Okay. Max is not going to drop the cash on that Sweet 16 seat. Yeah, so getting back to our discussion here in the lower seeds, winning their Sweet 16 game and getting to the Final Four, there are so many appetizing picks here. There's so many games that I'm excited to watch and that I would like to see happen. I would love to see Loyola Chicago do it. I think Musselman's team in the Wolfpack in Nevada may be just a bit much for them in that game. And similarly, I say the same thing about Kansas' scoring on the perimeter against Clemson, although Kansas defense is nothing to write home about. Clemson offensively could really expose them in that game, especially if Azubuike is out. I think you might call me crazy for this, and okay. I'm not being biased because I'm a Syracuse guy. I think Syracuse actually, with how they've played defensively, might have the best chance to pull it off because they're playing free, they're playing loose. The nerves aren't there. They've already won. They've already won 2 tournament games, or was it 3, to get to this point to even play Duke. Jim Boeheim has lost so many times to Mike Krzyzewski. Both those coaches know each other in and out. Boeheim's got the zone going at a different level, and he's already shut down one prolific seed in Michigan State. Can he do it to Grayson Allen, Marvin Bagley, and Duke? That is a hard thing to say, but watching Syracuse so far, they already lost to Duke a couple of times this year. Tyus Battle can get them baskets when they need to do it, and Chuck Wu, who's I think their 4-man on the Orange roster, has been playing well around the basket, rebounding for them. Might be able to pose problems to Marvin Bagley as far as the offensive glass is concerned. I don't know, man. I mean, I'm really thinking Syracuse can do this. Those coaches know each other. Syracuse is looking for revenge from earlier in the year. I know Duke plays well this time of year, but Syracuse, I think, can match them and can pull this off.
I was going to call you crazy just to spite you and just to do it, but I think you explained yourself pretty well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, this is fun stuff, man. I mean, it's a great first 2 rounds of the tournament already. We have some very intriguing matchups with these lower seeds in the Sweet 16 and then later on in the Elite 8 and beyond. This is going to be great, entertaining basketball no matter what it is, and what a year to be a low seed.
It is a great year to be a basketball fan at all at this level. I mean, the professional level will probably be the same matchup we're used to the last couple of years. But here in the college ranks, it is so much fun. One and done has come home to roost. The Blue Bloods are dead. Long live the mid-majors.
Yeah, for mid-majors. Hold your flag high. We'll take a break right now. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit of hockey and then wrap it up here on this Wednesday morning on the Cheap Seats. Be sure to go to our Facebook page at the Cheap Seats Podcast. Vote on our poll question, which we will get up there at some point. Our poll question: which of these lower seeds has the best chance of getting to the Final Four? Go there right now. Vote. We'll be back after this on the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of Hashtag No Filter Friday, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, Hashtag No Filter Friday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Hashtag No Filter Friday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
are again paying not top dollar for these seats because we don't want to drop the cash to go to an NCAA tournament game. You're listening to The Cheap Seats. How you doing this morning? Hope you're enjoying the show. Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Chiles. Broken on basketball. Now it's time for college hockey, a passion of Max and I's. This hockey tournament, Max, we won't get into my discussion about regional seeding because I'm frustrated with that every year. But some very interesting teams, some teams making a return to the tournament. Some teams have been great all year and they expected to be here. Your initial look at this bracket.
My initial look is that the winning the conference tournament does not matter for seeding. It just doesn't. BU was a champion in the Hockey East tournament, but man, did they not play well in October and November and December. They just were not the team that they are now. I mean, looking at other regionals outside of the Worcester area, St. Cloud State is, I think, undisputedly a top seed. Cornell as well. Ohio State and Princeton is looking like, that could be a really interesting matchup with Denver and Penn State on the other side. Denver is still a powerhouse team. I don't care if they're a 2 seed. They're still a contender to win this tournament. But Notre Dame is another great pick. There really isn't a good team to write off and say, yep, they can't win.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is like it is with anything, and I've always affectionately called the hockey tournament. If basketball is March Madness, hockey is the Russian roulette wheel of death. I mean, it basically is like strapping some guy to one of those big, big roulette wheel, and then throwing like a knife at him and hoping to miss him as he spins by. That's hockey. I mean, it's such a razor's edge of chance and luck in this tournament. All you have to do is get in and win. I think that's more true in hockey. Eastern teams, East Coast schools, I think are the class of the country this year. Providence, Clarkson's been really, really good. Of course, their women won the national championship a few days ago. Notre Dame, who I've seen in person, and I saw Michigan beat Notre Dame in person in South Bend this year. You were there at that game as well. Notre Dame has had excellent goaltending from Cale Morris every year. Any goaltender is going to give a team like Notre Dame, who has offensive skill as well, don't sell them short, but goaltending is always going to give you an edge in this tournament. I think that helps Notre Dame in this tournament. Michigan Northeastern, my alma mater, has really picked it up the last few weeks. They played really, really well until losing to Ohio State in the Big Ten semifinals. Michigan has a top line in Dexter Danks, Cooper Marody, and Tony Calderon. Calderon, a senior, who have been top 10, top 15 in the nation in scoring all year. Cooper Marody, I think, still leads the nation in assists. Michigan has the offensive ability, and then Hayden Levine, their goaltender, who wasn't expected to start the year, has been playing well for them as well. Michigan, I think, as anyone has the chance to move on. Cornell is always very, very tough. Of course, Michigan has to contend with 3 East Coast schools in that bracket. And then, interestingly enough, in the first round in Sioux Falls, 3 Minnesota schools, Max, in that bracket, and along with Air Force, only one of them can advance.
Yeah, this South Dakota regional is going to be great with Minnesota State Mankato, Minnesota Duluth in a first-round matchup. That is a prime-time deal in Minnesota hockey. And Air Force against St. Cloud State, I mean, best of luck to the cadets. Best of luck to you. St. Cloud State's been playing so good of late.
They are offensively gifted. I think they still lead the nation in goals per game. They're a very, very good team. We talk about 16s over 1 in basketball. I don't know if you remember this. The equivalent to that in hockey was, I think, 09 or 10 when Holy Cross was the 16 overall seed and they beat Minnesota. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. That was, I think, the year that if it was 2009, that was the last year BU won the championship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Minnesota was, nobody thought they could be beaten that year, which is their first mistake, to think that no one can be beaten. The Crusaders from Holy Cross upset the Gophers. It has happened. I'm with you. I mean, of course, I'm going against what I just said, but I really don't think Air Force has a chance in that game. Ohio State Princeton is a different sort of matchup or a different set of styles in that game. The Tigers a little bit more defensive oriented, and Ohio State will skate up and down the ice, and then they've had great goaltending all season. Denver and Penn State may be a shootout type of game there in the Midwest in Allentown, PA. The Nittany Lions right in their backyard. I guess quickly, who gets to the Frozen Four and who wins the national championship? Put you on the spot.
Okay, well, that means I have to look at the first round here, and I think let's stick with the South Dakota Regional first. I really think St. Cloud State gives everybody the kick up and down the ice treatment. They're just going to run the table there. I don't see the Bulldogs losing on this one. Ohio State-Princeton is a good matchup with Princeton coming out of the Ivy League. They have to play a defensive style with Harvard being a more offensively gifted team, but Harvard's not in this tournament, so they don't have to worry about meeting an Ivy League opponent. But give me Denver out of there. I think Denver is going to take it to Penn State, despite Penn State they're going to have the hometown crowd. I mean, State College is not very far from Allentown. It is a very easy drive, but give me the Pioneers to come out of there. Now, in the opposite side with Notre Dame, Michigan Tech, I think Notre Dame's got an easy enough matchup here as long as they get a good goaltending and a good performance out of their defense. But whoever wins out of Providence, Clarkson, boy, Notre Dame is going to have a tough time coping with Hayden Hockey in net for Providence. That is a great goaltending matchup potentially in the round of 8. And if it's Providence, I give it to Providence. But if it's Clarkson, I give it to Notre Dame. And I'm flip-flopping on this one. I understand. But my gut's telling me the Fighting Irish just because of how good their offense has been. And out of the East with Worcester, gosh, I want to pick BU. I really want to be the homer and pick my school. But, man, I don't think they get past Cornell. I want them to. I just don't think they will. And that said, Cornell will not get past Northeastern. Northeastern is going to the Frozen Four. They have a fantastic first line, kind of like a three-headed dragon in Adam Gaudette. With the hockey's player of the year, they have a great goaltender in Caden Primo.
I think all three of them
are great.
Yeah, and it's going to be very tough for my Wolverines to beat them. Don't they have their top line are all 25, 30 goal scorers, something like that?
Yeah, Nolan Stevens, Dylan Sakura, and Adam Gaudette. They are three of the best players in college hockey, and not only are they on the same team, they play together on the same line and often on the same power play unit. Northeastern is a great team. They lost in the semifinals of the Hockey East tournament to Providence, and that's part of the reason they are a lower seed at a 3. Man, Northeastern's good. They're for real this year.
All right. As for me, I have. I think it's going to be tough for anybody on that side of the bracket in Sioux Falls Regional to upset St. Cloud State. I have the Huskies going all the way to the Frozen Four in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm going to go against the grain a little bit. And Penn State, Michigan's played them in the Big Ten tournament many times over the last few years. The Nittany Lions are a stickler for details. They are like a thorn in your side. They never go away. I know this might seem a little outlandish and, Big Ten guy, but I picked Penn State to pull it off. Penn State, St. Cloud State, yes. Penn State. I think Penn State, I've watched them this year. They've had some down moments this season, but they've had just enough offense and goaltending to get by. I think they ratcheted up a little bit, with the added benefit of playing in Pennsylvania. So pull that off. St. Cloud State, Penn State in the Frozen Four. And then on the other side, I just don't think anybody can touch Notre Dame. Michigan beat them a few times this year, but Notre Dame always has the knack to get that clutch goal when they need to. And I think it'll be them and Northeastern in the Frozen Four to determine who goes to the national championship.
This is going to be good. I mean, there's actually, speaking of cheap seats, guess what the student discount is for BU students to get to the DCU Center in Worcester?
What's the discount?
It's $20.
Wow, you got to go. That is amazing. Yeah, take advantage.
For a ticket to the game, a bus trip to the game, and on top of that, if BU beats Cornell, a return ticket to the next day's game for the same $20.
That's sweet. That is sweet, my friend.
I don't know how I don't take advantage of this. I'm probably going to this game.
Do it. I mean, we won't get into this, but if the Big Ten actually lobbied for a regional in the Midwest, I do the same thing for Michigan, and hopefully that changes. There's so many teams in the East Coast for college hockey. I get where they put regionals, but it'd be nice to see a regional in Chicago or Indy or Detroit or something. Maybe we'll get that. Maybe we'll see campsite games come back. That is my hope chest, my hope for that to happen. I don't think it will, but we just need to get these regionals out of empty buildings.
Yeah, the empty building syndrome has got to be enough. There are too many empty seats at some of these. I mean, I don't know if they're going to sell Webster Bank Arena out in Bridgeport. I mean, DCU is going to be packed with BU kids. That's what I know.
All right, Max will be one of them there. Really quickly, as we wrap up this episode of the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network, our strange stories of the day. Max, I will give you mine first. A competition at a North Pole marathon. This, according to my favorite outlet, as everyone knows by now, the Huff Post.
Oh, boy, here we go.
If you are a runner and you think you have it challenging, wait till you try a chilly North Pole marathon. 50 runners braved these conditions. They ran on Saturday in the Arctic Ocean, staged at the Barneo Ice Camp. They wore, I'm getting this wrong, balaclavas, goggles, gloves, and thermal clothing. They had to complete 12 laps of a course, and then just in order to make it so that they didn't pass out or something, a refreshment stand as well. But to their credit, the small ridges, the ridges were not as treacherous for them. The snow was a little bit softer in this race. It wasn't as difficult, but for this North Pole Marathon, it was won by Peter Suchenia, a Polish runner, a time of, listen to this, only 4 hours, 6 minutes, and 34 seconds.
Okay, that is a lot shorter than when I could run in regular weather. Man, I struggle to go to the gym when it's just below freezing outside. Come on.
I'm with you. I'm lazy.
You're making us look bad.
Come on, Polish runners of the North Pole Marathon. Give us a chance here. You're making it look bad. Your story today on this Wild Wednesday, Maxim.
I have to shout out the CWHL. The Calgary Inferno will not be going to the Clarkson Cup Finals. They lost 1-0 in triple overtime to Kunlun Red Star, one of the Chinese expansion teams. It was a back-and-forth affair, and their Twitter account, @InfernoCWHL, was going nuts the whole time. As it went to overtime, it steadily became a, how do we stop crying? How do we look at this game? We can't watch this. Someone tell us if we win. Whoever runs their account really deserves a ton of credit. In their going to triple OT, they took a screenshot of how many tabs they had open. What do they have on there? Google search, how to get rid of overtime. Google search, how to score on Noor Ratti, the goalie for Red Star. Coping mechanisms, dealing with stress, 10 tips. 7 tips to avoid crying in the workplace. Man, Calgary had as much fun with this as they could, and sadly for them, it did not end the way they wanted it to. Alex Carpenter with the game winner in triple overtime. The 1-0 final to set up an all-debut final in the Clarkson Cup Finals with Kunlun Red Star against the Markham Thunder, both going for their first Clarkson Cup.
You know what?
What?
You know what? Sometimes I have to talk to people for crying in the workplace when I work with you every Wednesday.
Hey! Watch your mouth, Jeffrey!
Oh, I had to get that one in there. You set it up perfectly.
I waltzed right into that joke. All right, that's it. I'm taking off my headset. I'm going back. I'm going back to work. Come on.
We get these jokes in because we can, because every Wednesday we sit in the cheap seats and we bring it to you every Wednesday. Go to our Facebook page, vote on our poll question at the Cheap Seats Sports Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, follow Public House Media on Twitter, and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and our website, the Public House Media website, phmedia.com. That will do it for Max Wolpoff. He works hard every Wednesday for Jeffrey Chiles. I just ride on his coattails.
Yeah,
you've been listening.
Not hard enough for you. Come on.
You've been listening to the Cheap Seats Sports Podcast on the Public House Media Network. We're out. We'll see you later.